It's 3. If we could, please, we'll call the Budget and Finance meeting to order. For the record, we do have all members present. If I could have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. We have 2 new items before us. The first item is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into, execute, and deliver a guarantee agreement in connection with the issuance by the Development Finance Authority of Summit County of revenue bonds for the benefit of Akron Community Service Center and Urban League Incorporated, and declaring an emergency. Who will be speaking, please?
I will be.
Ms. Miller-Dawson.
Thank you. This is a continuation of the city's original commitment that started in late 2006. Again, let me start by saying the Urban League is a very, very important organization in this community, and it would be hard to imagine Akron without an Urban League. But again, we will be guaranteeing the bonds. The city will do 50%, the county will do 50%.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Hope? Okay. Okay. I'd like to get this passed out this evening if we could.
Yes, thank you. Let me just add one additional piece. The current bank is Fifth Third. We'll be moving from Fifth Third to the County of Summit. They will be buying it as an investment for their portfolio.
Okay, very good. Okay. We have a motion for suspension of the rules. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Ms. Sims. Ms. Sims, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the part where it says restructuring, we're talking just specifically to the dollar amount and not to the restructuring.
They will be restructuring the debt, period. Because what has happened is they do need additional money to make some improvements to the Urban League. We've had an architect in looking at the Urban League, trying to figure out how we could generate more revenue. So President's Hall is going to be repurposed.
So the restructuring references the layout also? And is this inclusive of the new tenants or and all that?
It will have new tenants, but this piece specifically is really on the guarantee that the city is putting forward. But we have been working, the city and the county and others have been working with the Urban League to try to help them just restructure their business model. Mm-hmm. So we've been doing that behind the scenes, but again, our guarantee is separate from the other work we've been doing.
So here's my question, another question. So I was over in county council when they talked about this last week, so the first time I kind of heard it. They were talking about some restructuring there, some new kind of tenants. So I guess, Mr. Hardy, you might be able to answer this question. As we look at skills gaps, and I know the extension was one of the folks that are supposed to be coming into the
OSU
Urban League.
extension, correct.
Are we looking from the city standpoint of what some of those new tenants will look like? I know it's important that we generate income, but we also know that there's skills gaps and stuff that
we've been looking for tenants that fit with the Urban League's message. So again, there's nothing off the table. We're just trying to do things that make sense. So it would look, more like a one-shop facility, but again, it needs to make sense and go with the Urban League's mission.
Yes.
So nothing is off the table. We're still trying to reconfigure what that should look like. Our only plan or hope is they can pay rent in their space.
Yeah, and I'm also equally as concerned about that we're staying in line with the work of the Urban League. I didn't quite know how the Ohio Extension fit into that mode and how that gets at some of the skills gaps, deficits that we talk about in some of our underserved communities that the Urban League serves. So I guess
the one thing with the OSU, remember they have like an urban garden down there, and
they have master gardens and they do stuff around nutrition, but
right.
Again,
and that was the key piece, the pieces around nutrition. I mean, it's a desert down there basically, so we need to be doing things to help with the food desert. And so they thought it was a great match. OSU wanted to be in Akron. They want to be in that area. And again, they do bring skills that we believe will be useful to the Urban League clients.
So thank you for being so, Diane, so detailed. And so is most of the reconstruction being done to accommodate them?
Not all of it. They are the first tenants that we've identified. They've walked through the facility. They've decided what they wanted their layout to look like. Again, we are looking for other customers or other tenants that make sense and keep with the Urban League message and mission.
So I know you can't answer this question. Again, I'm just hopeful what we're thinking about, and I know some may get tired of hearing Elevate Akron or hearing about skills gaps in our communities, that these are really aimed at doing that. I don't know exactly. I've worked with Ohio Extension for a number of years, not sure how that fits into the Urban League model. Urban agriculture is kind of new to them, so to speak. It's not been their bailiwick. So just kind of wondering, are we thinking about that as we look at these new partners?
We are, but if you have some ideals or people you think we should be reaching out to.
I didn't know they were doing this until.
Okay, but if you have something, just,
Yes,
let
ma'am.
me know, or let Brian Nelson know, or Larry Chetwick, because again,
Okay.
we're looking for ideals. We're trying to make it work. We want the Urban League to be successful.
So last question. Now, if we still have President's Hall, perhaps there would be some connection between Ohio Extension and food. Will they have any usage of that space as a service provider in terms of food?
I don't know an answer for that right now. That's probably something we're looking at. But again, President's Hall as a model, just in general, did not work. It had a huge overhead. It was not carrying its full weight. So it was something, just think about when you see the Urban League out in the community doing their functions, they no longer have functions at President's Hall because, again, it was a very expensive model that did not work in the Urban League.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's no other questions or comments. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Opposed? Thank you. We'll report that out this evening. Secondly, we have an ordinance approving and ratifying the Director of Information Technologies entering into an agreement with Malwarebytes Incorporated for a 3-year service agreement and declaring an emergency. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Please accept me as a stand-in for our wonderful Mr. Pettit, who has fallen ill today. But I've been working with Mark through this cyber attack and the remediation, so I feel confident that I can answer questions and present effectively today. So what you have before you is legislation ratifying the actions that we took during the remediation of the cyber attack to add an additional piece of software on all of our computers throughout the city to provide a second layer of protection in addition to McAfee services against viruses such as the one that we were infected with. So just a little bit about Malwarebytes. It is a cloud-based solution. It's meant to be endpoint protection, so again, that desktop mentality, so sits right on your computer, but it provides enterprise-level applications for folks in IT to be able to see at a moment's notice across all of our PCs what's going on and where. We chose this in large part based upon, again, the city, county, state, and federal team that was put together to combat the cyber attack. This group, this organization, Malwarebytes, has been around since 2004. They're known in the industry. They have a very solid track record. And when we deployed it to remediate this particular virus, it was very effective. And so we felt, again, confident that doing a 3-year service agreement to keep it on our computers, again, as a secondary protective measure was warranted. Again, it prevents infection from PC to PC, so it's not a substitute for McAfee. It's an addition to, it's another tool in the toolbox. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee members or council members may have.
I had one question. Sure. It's just my own ignorance. What's the difference between endpoint security and endpoint protection? I see we have 100 users and then 1,200 on the other.
So I think that might just be language from my perspective. Okay. Endpoint security and endpoint protection are essentially the same thing. What it's trying to say is that this particular piece of software provides the protection at the end user's perspective. So that PC where we're sitting and typing, that's where it sits, that's where it protects.
This is pretty much an industry standard, Malwarebytes.
Correct. Yeah, Mr. Pettit's very familiar with them, has used them over the course of his career. Again, the National Guard, FBI, others are very familiar with them as an effective remediation tool and a protection tool. And we felt, and they were very effective at remediating this particular issue. And so we thought, given the sophisticated nature of this attack and the fact that it was effective at remediating it, we thought it was a good tool to go ahead and keep on our computers for another 3 years.
Does Malwarebytes, does it prevent things that are more or less invited in by clicking on something as opposed to somebody coming in the back door?
That's correct. So, for example, phishing activities where you have malicious intent from hackers on the outside that might send fake emails or fake communications to try and get into the system. This helps to protect and also remediate. So if someone were to, God forbid, click on something they shouldn't, it helps to contain the virus there instead of spreading to other PCs.
Okay, good. Are there questions or comments? Ms. Amobian?
So I'm assuming that this is for 3 years. If we decide that we want to renew in another 3 years, would there be some type of discount, or have we gone beyond the 3 year, looking at what can we do if we renew?
We would absolutely have the opportunity to renegotiate at the end of the 3-year term. We'd have 3 years of track record to see how we liked working with them and how effective they were. We feel pretty confident, but nothing beats working with somebody. And we would come back to this council with that new negotiation.
Yeah. And this quantity piece, this is 1,200 PCs and 100, what, PCs or what?
They are PCs, that's
They
my
are PCs
understanding.
too? Okay.
So basically, every computer we have in the city will have both McAfee and Malwarebytes on it to protect it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. No, please.
I have questions. I was hoping Mark would be here, so Mr. Hardy, you get to answer all these questions that I
will
have.
try.
I was glad to hear you say that it's just an addition, not a substitution for McAfee, because I was a little concerned. When I read the back of it, it seems like we've already signed something with them.
Yes, so this was the legislation you have before you, much like when we have a water main break. This is ratifying actions that we took during the attack. So we needed something that would be effective at remediating what was going on. So it does two things. It protects and it fights. So it protects against infection. That's what we hope going forward. But if you do have an infection, it fights it. And so we used it on all of our PCs to remediate, get rid of the virus that we had, but going forward, it also has, it's built to be protective in nature as well. So it's kind of like a water main break. We went ahead and put something in place that was going to be in addition to what McAfee did part of it, this cleared the rest of it. So they're complementary to each other.
So we still have a contract with McAfee for how
Yes, ma'am.
long?
I don't have the length of contract, but yes, we still are engaged with McAfee, and its software still sits on our PCs.
So what other providers did you guys seek out? Was there a bid process, or this was just someone that Mark thought would be a good fit for us?
So it was decided based upon a collective consensus. So we had, in combating this particular cyber attack, we had members of the city-county team, we had the state of Ohio through the National Guard, and then we had the FBI. So with my limited knowledge of IT, I can tell you exactly how the decision was made. They needed something in addition to McAfee that was going to fight off this particular virus, particularly the PC-to-PC reinfection. Everyone felt comfortable that this was going to be the best thing to deploy at the time of attack. So it was, I would submit to council that there was not necessarily time, much like a water main break, to go through the full process. So this particular solution was effective at remediating the issue. People are familiar with it. We felt that it was important to give it 3 years while we continue to build our resources in IT but there was not a formal process per se. It was trying to get consensus from everyone that was helping us to combat the issue, what was going to be most effective at the time needed, and this was what they went with.
So, just a few concerns of mine. I don't need to know about how we're being monitored prior to that, knowing that McAfee was there, but my concern is, you know, a lot of these malware software programs, when you get towards the end of the subscription and they're trying to get you to renew, you know, all of a sudden you're getting viruses and you're getting the pop-ups from them, and that's a concern for me. And so when I was reading the legislation over the weekend, I decided to do a little research because I'm sort of kind of a little techie, and I noticed that they've got quite a few Better Business Bureau complaints for the very thing that I'm concerned about. So I want us to be very mindful of that. I know we had to hurry and make a decision, but I think we need to be very mindful of a lot of the Better Business Bureau complaints that they've had logged against them in this past year. And even if you go out 3 years, it's a substantial amount of complaints for that very same thing, where a lot of people are complaining when they got to the end of the subscription, and all of a sudden all their systems were infected. Even the one that we have for our small business, I don't want to name the company, but all of our sites went down. 6 sites went down, and they wanted us to repay for their program. And lo and behold, we paid for the program, all of our sites came back up. So those kind of things concern me, and that's why I did a little research to see what kind of, you know, backlash or praises that they got, and they were involved in a really contentious, heavy federal lawsuit because of one of these. So I just want us to be mindful of making sure that we have ourselves in a situation where we be careful so we don't end up with come 2.5 years and everybody's computers go down, and then, you know, so that concerns me a little bit, and I'd like to talk to Mark a little bit more about just the endpoint kind of things that they have to deal with when it comes to the programs.
I will make sure that Mark follows up with you personally. As I said, this is just an initial engagement. It will run out. We can choose to renew it or not. And at the time, you know, from an administration's perspective, we went with the consensus of the team, you know, at all levels, and this was the company. But I think your concerns are duly noted. I'll have Mark follow up personally with him.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Sims?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is this 99,000 a year or annually?
Total. It's total over the 3 years.
So on the 1,200 pieces, what are those pieces?
Those are the PCs, computers that we use every day throughout the city for employees to do the work of the city.
So what is the piece? That costs $69 a unit. What is that?
So it's a per unit cost. So they charge you based upon how many PCs you're going to actually license. And so in this case, that's how many
So we
we
have 1,200, or we have extra ones?
1,200 is pretty all-inclusive, and I can tell you without a doubt that after this cyber attack, we know exactly where they are, how many we have, and who's using them.
Thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. In regards to, I hope you actually studied to see who actually uses them, because I haven't touched my PC in years, so don't insure mine. I mean, I do everything on my phone. But you know, we had asked during this administration, even before, you know, what is our tech strategic plan?
Yeah.
And this is long before you guys were here, when we were looking at our online legislation. We did an in-depth study on using servers or going cloud-based. And this was back when Rick Schmaltz was our tech guy. Where do we stand on that right now? Because this is just going to get worse. Yeah. I mean, it's just the age that we're in right now. And are we considering looking at cities that are comparable to us, and how their cloud-based system is using, and maybe just using our servers. Because what I hate to see is where we've made this expense to upgrade all of our hardware, and then we get another attack, and we have to do that again. So are we considering, have we looked into going to a cloud-based system and the pros and cons?
We have, and I think that I can speak for Mark in saying that that is the direction that we are headed. We had been working, Mark and I in particular, on a plan for mayor and council to consider in terms of how we want to invest in IT going forward and what is the best play. Separate out smart city stuff, just good old-fashioned, data and information technology. And that is where folks are heading. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, this particular cyber attack has brought home for all of us the real-life 21st century threat that this city and businesses and organizations like ours are going to continue to face. Summit County is no different. In fact, interestingly enough, when we all went to Emmitsburg in 2017, this was the scenario that we played out, which quite honestly, speaking only for myself, was that training was invaluable to know where to go and when. But specifically to your question, we are working on a long-term plan to put the city of Akron IT into a better defensible position going forward, given the new threats of today. It does include hardware that is, and again, I'm not, I don't have degrees in technology, but you can never get away from hardware completely. You still have to have servers. The question is, where do they sit and how are they connected and what's the redundancy? And so what Mark and his team have been working on is how do we better leverage the infrastructure that we have available to us in the city, for example, in Volta and other systems like that, to make smart investments into our hardware and software infrastructure, but particularly our hardware infrastructure to do what you are suggesting, which is go to a cloud-based redundant system that puts us in a better defensible position. One thing that I have learned through this from the folks that are higher up than I am that fight these things every day is that you can never be 100% sure that your security systems are going to prevent everything, but you can use best practices. And so the good thing that has come out of this particular cyber attack is we have some of the best minds in the country who have given us that best practice, and that is definitely one of them. So we anticipate coming to, obviously first to the mayor to get his input, and then eventually to city council through capital and operating budgets and just updating in general, a plan to put the city and investments it can make to put us in a much better defensible position going forward. And it does include cloud-based technology.
Now, my next question is, with the malware protection we were using and this one that you're asking us to approve, what type of insurance, like, do they cover any of our loss? And then if I can add to that, what is our actual loss associated with this attack?
Sure. I'd have to get back to you on any sort of insurance or indemnity that they give to us based on attacks. But what Malwarebytes does is it provides a secondary barrier on all of our PCs, not only to prevent infection, but as Chairman Freeman noted, if someone does click on an email they shouldn't, a malicious email, it contains it to that computer. McAfee did an incredible job of helping us to detect what was going on pretty quickly. What we learned through this process through our partners at the National Guard and FBI is that it is now considered best practice to have not one but two security software pieces on every computer. So that is something that we have moved to correct immediately to put, again, us in a better defensible position. As it relates to your second question with this particular attack, from everything that we know, and the FBI will continue to do its investigation, and as will the State Highway Patrol and National Guard, this was a financially motivated attack. Unlike what many of you dealt with in 2013, these hackers or hacker were looking for money. And when we figured it out and we stopped them, what I've been telling people is they essentially lit the place on fire. And So the good news is that our systems that were in place prevented the theft of funds. We were able to identify that a virus was, a malicious virus was infecting our system and take immediate steps to keep data breaches from happening. And so from everything we know to date, no data, whether it be customer, city employee, et cetera, was harvested for malicious purposes. They were looking for money, and they tried it. They weren't successful, and when they weren't successful, they basically released their Kraken, if you will, and it wreaked havoc on our systems, which were effectively step-by-step remediating and again, thinking now long-term about how we can put ourselves in a better spot.
Okay. Again, you may not have it now, but if we get an idea of, what do we have to spend to replace, repair, and then it was in one of the articles, what have we spent since 2013 or whenever it was? Maybe there was a number thrown out there. I didn't know what the exact time period was. Something, was it $9 million?
That's what we've spent since 2016, but we do have the number on what the city has spent since 2013.
Okay. $9 million to deal with.
That's what we've invested into the IT infrastructure at the city. So not necessarily just security, but everything we've invested into our IT hardware and software infrastructure since 2016. But we do have the numbers, and we can calculate that since the last attack in 2013.
I know I said that. Last thing, if we have some, like the university or someone that could give us an analysis, I know we could also bring in vendors that would give us analysis. I'd love to see, as soon as possible, the costs for the initial investment for cloud-based and what all that would cover. Because like you said, there's the cloud, but then there's also looking at it combined with the smart city application.
Sure.
To the infrastructure investment that we've made thus far, that would be helpful. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Fusco?
Yeah, I don't want to hold up the committee whatsoever, but after the vote, the recommendation, if you guys can give us a quick update where we're at currently in terms of addressing where we're at. I don't want to hold up the legislation, though.
And just when I saw the legislation come in, some other folks have done research, everybody's very, very clear. No, don't just have malware bites.
Yeah.
They're very clear about that. It's a backup to, whatever, Norton or McAfee, whatever you use, so.
Yeah.
So, any other questions or comments? If not, I would like to see this passed out this evening. Motion to suspend the rules. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Very good. We'll pass this out this evening, and I don't know if Bill Fatica still has his sanity about him, but please express our gratitude.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you. Please know that all of our IT staff, Mr. Pettit, and some folks that don't have IT behind their name, i.e. a lot of people sitting here, did a tremendous job. And they were here to the wee hours of the morning, several days in a row, taking shifts. It was really something to see, and they, without question, saved this city additional cost and grief in the steps they took.
Yeah, the only thing that could make it worse is if we'd had a big snowstorm then that would have been awful, so.
Too soon.
Okay, yeah, so we can get an update afterward?
Sure.
Okay, yeah,
If
sure.
that's reasonable. So we are making incredibly good progress bringing systems back up online. It is a slow process, but the length of time, I assure you, is due completely to the fact that our team wants to make sure that things really are clean and free from the virus before we bring them back on. Our email server was the most affected, and that is obvious because one of the ways that we think that these particular individuals or individual got into our system was through phishing email. So that is at least one area where it could have started. We think it is the area where it could have started, but I know the investigation is still ongoing. So email has been, I know for many of you, a struggle. Bear with us, but piece by piece, we're bringing things up. We're starting to look at our filters to make sure that, again, nothing malicious is getting through. We As I updated recently, everything that we know to date is that no data was harvested. This was a financially motivated crime. They did not get any money. According to what we know from the FBI, there were some other entities since last summer that were infected with something similar, and again, it was financially motivated, not data motivated. So if that changes, City Council will be among the first to know. The mayor is committed to make that knowledge public if that should change. So I think we're working through all of our systems and servers. We appreciate everybody's patience in that, and again, I fully expect that Mr. Pettit and others will be coming back to this council, whether through the operating budget cycle or on its own, to brief council on what smart investments we can make going forward to increase our position as these threats continue. Unfortunately, the other thing we've learned from the great folks at the Army National Guard and the FBI is that these threats are only increasing in number and sophistication. So threats are only increasing in number and sophistication. So as soon as the software figures out how to beat one, somebody else figures out how to do something else. So we have to know, as leaders in the city, that this is an ongoing threat, just like fire, police, and all sorts of other things. So we will be coming back to council this year with suggested investments as it relates to improving our infrastructure, both hardware and software, to try and keep up with that threat. But we're making good progress. I know some things were slow. I know some things were down. And as Chairman Freeman pointed out, at the absolute inopportune time. But I am incredibly proud of the staff, both in IT and across our divisions. They have put customer service first and foremost, especially our citizens, and for the most part, we're working through all of those issues.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If there's nothing else to come before us, we will adjourn at 3:32. Thank you very much.